Have you ever noticed how the most powerful people in any room aren't the ones shouting the loudest or reacting to every little thing? They're the ones watching, waiting, completely unfazed while everyone else loses their composure. That's not an accident. That's strategic detachment, and it's been the secret weapon of history's most influential figures, from Machiavelli to modern leaders. Imagine standing in the middle of chaos, people arguing, emotions running high, tensions rising, and you're the only one with a clear mind, seeing opportunities that others miss because they're too caught up in their feelings. That's the power I'm going to show you how to harness today. Most people are slaves to their emotional reactions. Someone says something they don't like, and immediately they're triggered. Their face changes, their voice shifts, they lose control, and in that moment, they lose all their power. What if I told you that the single most important skill for gaining influence isn't charisma or intelligence, but the ability to detach yourself from emotional reactions that cloud your judgment? The truth is, when others are emotional, the person who maintains composure becomes the most powerful person in the room. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal exactly how emotional non-reactivity becomes your greatest source of power. I'll show you how to maintain perspective when everyone around you is losing theirs, and how to practice strategic detachment in ways that will transform your relationships, your career, and your life. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about mastering them. And when you master your emotions, you master your influence over yourself and others. Number 1. The 5-second reset method. Think about the last time someone pushed your buttons. Remember that rush of emotion, the heat rising to your face, your heart pounding, that feeling of losing control. In that moment, whatever leverage you had in that situation completely vanished. But what if you could change that pattern forever with just 5 seconds of your time? Most people believe emotional mastery takes years of meditation or therapy. They're wrong. The difference between those controlled by their emotions and those who control their emotions often comes down to a single moment, the split second between trigger and response. This tiny gap is where your true power lies. You've probably heard the old advice to count to 10 when you're angry. But that approach is outdated and ineffective because it doesn't actually change your relationship with the emotion. It just delays your reaction slightly. What I'm about to show you rewires your brain's response pattern at a fundamental level. The most influential people throughout history, from ancient Stoic philosophers to modern negotiators, all share one ability. They can step outside their emotional reactions and observe them objectively. They experience emotions without becoming their emotions. This skill isn't something they were born with, it's something they developed. Imagine having a remote control for your emotional responses. Picture being able to pause, rewind, and even cancel automatic reactions that normally hijack your brain. This isn't fantasy. It's a neurological reality that you can begin mastering today. Our first technique, point number 1 out of our 5 powerful strategies, is what I call the 5-second reset method. This isn't just another mindfulness technique. It's a neural pattern interrupt that creates instant psychological distance between you and your emotional triggers. Here's exactly how it works. When you feel an emotional surge beginning, whether anger, fear, anxiety, or even excessive excitement, take a single deep breath. But this isn't just any breath. As you inhale, visualize yourself physically stepping backward out of your body. Imagine watching yourself from 3 feet away. As you exhale, mentally say, I notice this feeling. This 5-second practice does something remarkable to your brain. It activates your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, while simultaneously creating psychological distance from the emotion. You're no longer trapped inside the feeling. You're observing it. The power of this method comes from its simplicity and immediate applicability. You can do it anywhere, anytime, with no one even noticing. In a heated meeting, 5-second reset. Dealing with a difficult customer, 5-second reset. About to send an angry text, 5-second reset. With consistent practice, this technique literally rewires your neural pathways. What once triggered an automatic emotional response now triggers this pattern. Interrupt instead. Your brain creates a new default. Observation rather than reaction. Start practicing this today. The next time you feel an emotional trigger, remember, one breath, step back mentally, and observe. This simple 5-second practice is your first step toward emotional mastery. And remember, when you master detachment, you master influence, both over yourself and others. Number 2, the reverse emotional mirror strategy. Have you ever walked away from an interaction and wondered, how did I get so caught up in that? Perhaps a calm conversation suddenly escalated into an argument, or a simple negotiation became unnecessarily tense. Something happens in these moments that most people never notice, a silent emotional dance that dictates who leads and who follows. What's fascinating about human interaction is how unconsciously we mirror each other's emotional states. When someone raises their voice, you naturally tend to raise yours. When they speed up their speech in excitement, you match their pace. When they lean forward aggressively, you instinctively do the same. This mirroring happens automatically, below the threshold of conscious awareness. But this unconscious mirroring hands over your emotional power to whoever can trigger the strongest reaction. The person who controls the emotional temperature of an interaction is the one with the true influence. And yet, most people surrender this control without ever realizing it. Think about the most powerful negotiators, leaders, and influencers you've witnessed. Have you noticed something peculiar about their behavior? When tensions rise, they become remarkably calm. When others rush, they deliberately slow down. They never match emotional escalation. They counter it. This isn't an accident. It's a deliberate strategy that the emotionally intelligent have used for centuries. I'm about to reveal point number 2 of our 5-part framework for emotional mastery. The reverse emotional mirror strategy. This technique will transform how others respond to you in virtually any interaction. The reverse emotional mirror strategy works directly against our biological programming. Instead of matching someone's emotional intensity, which is what your brain is wired to do, you deliberately adopt the inverse emotional state. When they get loud, you get quiet. When they speed up, you slow down. When they make sudden movements, you become still. This creates what psychologists call a pattern interrupt. The other person's brain expects mirroring, but instead encounters its opposite. This unexpected response pattern creates a vacuum, an emotional imbalance that needs to be resolved. And here's the magic. People will almost always resolve this imbalance by adjusting themselves to match your emotional state, not the other way around. Let me give you a practical example. Next time someone raises their voice at you, try this. Lower your voice slightly and slow your speech down by about 20%. Watch what happens. Within seconds, they'll likely begin matching your calmer tone. You've just flipped the script on who's leading the emotional dance. The beauty of this strategy is that it works in virtually any context. Business negotiations, family disagreements, even casual conversations. By refusing to mirror escalation and instead projecting its opposite, you create a gravitational pull that brings others into your emotional orbit. Start practicing this technique in low-stakes situations first. Notice how people respond when you deliberately invert their emotional energy. With practice, this approach becomes second nature, a powerful tool in your arsenal of emotional mastery. And remember, when you master detachment through techniques like the reverse emotional mirror, you master influence in ways that change every relationship in your life. Number 3, The Machiavellian pause. What's the most uncomfortable thing for most people? It's not conflict or criticism, it's silence. The moment a conversation falls silent, most people feel an almost irresistible urge to fill the void. This discomfort with silence reveals one of humanity's greatest psychological vulnerabilities, one that has been exploited by master influencers throughout history. Niccolo Machiavelli, the 16th century political philosopher whose name has become synonymous with strategic manipulation, understood this principle deeply. He knew that silence isn't just the absence of speech. It's a powerful tool that creates psychological pressure. This pressure can reveal information, influence decisions, and shift power dynamics in profound ways. Think about your own experience with silence. When someone doesn't immediately respond to your question or statement, what happens? You start to wonder, did I say something wrong? Are they upset? Should I clarify? This uncertainty creates mental and emotional tension. And when we feel tension, we often try to relieve it by talking more, explaining further, making concessions, or revealing information we hadn't planned to share. The most influential people in any room know this intuitively. They use silence not as dead space, but as an active tool, a form of communication that speaks volumes without saying a word. While everyone else is busy filling the air with words, these masters of influence are collecting information, assessing weaknesses, and maintaining complete emotional control. This brings us to point number 3 of our 5-part framework for emotional mastery, the Machiavellian pause. This technique will transform how you handle high-pressure conversations and emotionally charged situations. The Machiavellian pause is the art of strategic silence. When others expect a reaction from you, especially an emotional one, you offer nothing but calculated stillness. No words, no visible reaction, just composed silence. This creates what psychologists call an information vacuum, an empty space that others feel compelled to fill. Here's what makes this technique so powerful. When someone throws an emotional statement at you expecting a reaction, they've already planned for your likely responses, but they haven't planned for silence. Your pause disrupts their mental script and creates uncertainty. In their rush to fill this uncomfortable void, they often reveal far more than they intended, their true motivations, hidden concerns, or additional information that gives you an advantage. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine someone makes an aggressive demand or accusation. Instead of defending yourself or counterattacking, simply maintain eye contact, keep your expression neutral, and say nothing for 3 to 5 seconds. You'll be amazed at how often they'll start backtracking, clarifying, or making concessions without you saying a single word. The person who speaks least during emotional exchanges typically gains the most valuable intelligence. By practicing the Machiavellian pause, you transform potentially triggering moments into opportunities for deeper insight and greater influence. Start implementing this technique gradually. Begin with smaller pauses in everyday conversations, then work your way up to longer strategic silences in more challenging interactions. With practice, you'll develop comfort with silence that few others possess, and this comfort translates directly into power. Remember, mastering detachment through techniques like the Machiavellian pause gives you unparalleled influence in any interaction. Number 4. Emotional weatherproofing. Why do some people crumble under pressure while others thrive? Why can certain individuals stay composed during chaos, while most people lose control of their emotions? The difference isn't personality or genetics. It's training. Specifically, it's about how deliberately they've weatherproofed their emotional responses. Think about physical fitness for a moment. If you've never lifted weights and suddenly try to bench press 200 pounds, you'll likely fail. Your muscles haven't been conditioned for that stress. But with consistent training, gradually increasing the weight over time, your body adapts. What once seemed impossible becomes manageable. Your emotional resilience works exactly the same way. If you've never intentionally exposed yourself to emotional discomfort, then when life inevitably throws major stressors your way, you'll be unprepared. Your emotional muscles will fail under the pressure. This is why so many people react poorly in high-stakes situations. They've never trained themselves to handle discomfort. The most influential people throughout history, from military leaders to business titans to political strategists, all share one common trait. They've systematically built their emotional resilience through deliberate exposure to discomfort. They don't avoid challenging situations. They seek them out in controlled doses. This builds what psychologists now call emotional immunity, the ability to maintain composure and clarity regardless of external circumstances. This brings us to point number 4 of our 5-part framework for emotional mastery: emotional weatherproofing. This technique will transform your ability to stay detached and influential, even in the most challenging situations. Emotional weatherproofing is the systematic development of your emotional immune system through intentional exposure to controlled doses of discomfort daily. Just as vaccines work by introducing small amounts of a pathogen to build immunity, you can immunize yourself against emotional hijacking by deliberately placing yourself in mildly uncomfortable situations. Here's how to implement this powerful practice. Begin each morning with a 30-second cold shower. This might sound trivial, but the initial shock of cold water creates a perfect opportunity to practice emotional control. Rather than tensing up and gasping, focus on relaxing your muscles and controlling your breathing. This simple daily practice builds your ability to stay composed when your body wants to react. Next, regularly place yourself in situations where you'll receive feedback or criticism. Ask for honest assessments of your work or ideas, and practice listening without defending yourself. Feel the discomfort rise, acknowledge it, and let it pass without reacting. This builds your tolerance for one of life's most common emotional triggers. Finally, deliberately put yourself in unfamiliar social situations. Attend events where you don't know anyone. Speak up in meetings where you'd normally stay quiet. Take on projects slightly outside your comfort zone. Each of these experiences builds your capacity to function effectively under emotional pressure. What makes emotional weatherproofing so powerful is its cumulative effect. Each small exposure to discomfort strengthens your emotional resilience, making you progressively less reactive over time. After weeks of this practice, you'll notice situations that once triggered strong emotional responses now barely register. This systematic desensitization prevents emotional hijacking when it matters most, during negotiations, conflicts, or high-pressure decisions. While others are caught in their emotions, you remain clear-headed and strategic. And remember, when you master detachment through techniques like emotional weatherproofing, you master influence in ways that transform every area of your life. Number 5. The observation advantage. Have you ever watched two people argue and seen things about their interaction that neither of them could see themselves? Perhaps you noticed how one person's tone triggered the other's defensiveness, or how a certain phrase escalated the conflict unnecessarily. From your position outside the emotional exchange, you could see patterns and dynamics invisible to those caught up in the heat of the moment. This simple observation reveals a profound truth. Emotional distance creates clarity. When you're not emotionally entangled in a situation, you can see it with remarkable objectivity. You notice patterns, triggers, and opportunities that remain hidden to those whose judgment is clouded by emotion. The most sophisticated influencers throughout history, from master diplomats to legendary business negotiators, have leveraged this principle by transforming what would normally be emotionally triggering situations into opportunities for deeper observation. Instead of getting caught in reactive responses, they channel that energy into heightened awareness. They become students of human behavior precisely when most people become victims of their own reactions. This brings us to point number 5, our final technique in our framework for emotional mastery, the observation advantage. This approach will transform how you perceive and utilize emotionally charged interactions. The observation advantage is about converting emotional energy into analytical power by becoming a deliberate student of others' emotional patterns. Rather than getting swept up in your own reactions during challenging interactions, you redirect that energy toward noticing and analyzing what other people's responses reveal about their underlying psychology. Here's how to implement this powerful practice. The next time you find yourself in a potentially triggering situation, consciously shift your attention from your own emotional response to careful observation of the other person. Watch their facial expressions, body language, word choice, and tone of voice. Ask yourself, what does this reaction reveal about their fears, desires, or weaknesses? For example, when someone becomes defensive about a minor suggestion, that defensive response often reveals an insecurity they're protecting. When someone continually steers conversations towards certain topics, that pattern typically reveals their priorities or preoccupations. When someone reacts with disproportionate anger to small frustrations, that usually signals ongoing stress in other areas of their life. By training yourself to approach emotionally charged interactions with this analytical mindset, you accomplish two crucial things simultaneously. First, you maintain emotional detachment because your focus is on observation rather than reaction. Second, you gather invaluable insights into human motivation that most people miss entirely. These insights become your strategic advantage in any relationship or negotiation. You'll begin to understand what truly drives people, what they fear, what they value, and what they need, often better than they understand themselves. This deep psychological insight is the foundation of true influence. Begin practicing this technique immediately. In your very next conversation, set the intention to be more observer than participant. Notice not just what is said, but how it's said, what's not said, and what emotional currents run beneath the surface. Turn each interaction into an opportunity to deepen your understanding of human nature. With consistent practice, the observation advantage becomes second nature, a perpetual source of insight that informs every relationship and negotiation in your life. And remember, when you master detachment through techniques like the observation advantage, you master influence in ways that transform how you navigate the world. We've now explored 5 powerful strategies that transform emotional reactivity into strategic influence. From the 5-second reset method that creates instant psychological distance, to the reverse emotional mirror that flips the script on emotional dynamics, to the Machiavellian pause that leverages strategic silence, to emotional weatherproofing that builds your resilience, and finally to the observation advantage that converts emotional situations into intelligence-gathering opportunities. Each of these techniques serves the same fundamental principle: emotional detachment equals power. When you can maintain perspective while others lose theirs, you gain an unparalleled advantage in any interaction. This isn't about suppressing your emotions, it's about mastering them. Begin implementing these strategies today. Start with small moments, then gradually apply them to more challenging situations. With consistent practice, what once required conscious effort will become your natural response. You'll find yourself maintaining composure exactly when it matters most. Remember, the person who controls their emotions controls the situation. Master detachment, and you master influence over yourself, over others, and ultimately, over your destiny. The next video the algorithm chose for you isn't random. It's your next tactical upgrade. Click it now and continue your silent ascent.